Acting Deputy President, the Greens oppose these bills. They are so bad we don't think that you can amend them to save them. They are fundamentally cutting at the fabric of our community, and we will be opposing both these bills. ACOS says these bills are radical structure change to our social security system, and I agree with their comments, but I go further. These are radical changes to our community. Our community, once these changes come into effect, will no longer look and be as inclusive as it is now. We will no longer have a land of the fair go where we help the most vulnerable, where people are considered to have access to opportunity. It will be changed to a meaner, less inclusive community where if you have money or your parents have money, you will have advantage, you will have access to opportunity that many others don't. We will move from a community where we expect that we will help the most vulnerable and disadvantaged in our community, where we provide help to people who need it. These budget measures don't discriminate against specific peoples because they're having a go at everybody, at young people, at older Australians, at single parents, at people with disabilities and families. We have had overwhelming evidence that shows the negative impacts of these measures. And the Parliamentary Joint Human Rights Committee has made the point that they do not consider that the measures that deny people access to social security are compatible with human rights. Accordingly, it says the committee considers that the measure is incompatible with the right to social security and the right to an adequate standard of living. When they're looking at the age criteria for the New Start allowance and exclusion periods, which is chucking under 30-year-olds off income support. They say, accordingly, the committee considers the measures in Schedules 8 and 9 are incompatible with the rights to equality and non-discrimination on the basis of age. And they have also sought further advice from the Minister about the impact of these measures on equality and non-discrimination on the basis of gender and family responsibilities. So these measures are fundamentally unacceptable. As National Welfare Rights Network says, these measures are not fair and they're not equitable. The harshest cuts in these budget measures are to the most vulnerable. Yet there are people, these are the people that we should be helping. The most vulnerable are the people that should be supported by our community. Not supporting people the way that these budget measures would come into effect is not fair and it is not equitable. The government is in fact making a concerted attempt to rent giant, great big holes in our safety net. There is absolutely no doubt that is what's happening. These changes have been universally rejected by all submitters, except for the government's own department, to the Senate inquiry. People can see through what the government is attempting to do, and that is destroy our safety net. And the community doesn't like it, and neither do the Greens. We expect our safety net to provide a basic but adequate standard of living for our citizens and a foundation from which they can see beyond and address their barriers to inclusion in our community and barriers to employment and overcome their disadvantage. What we need is well-grounded, reasoned, evidence-based, credible, ethical approach that is person-centred and ensures their well-being and make sure that they are included in decision-making and giving them control over their lives. We should be working with people's strengths, hopes, aspirations and building on these. This approach will generate lasting change to those persons and their lives, while blaming, punishing, demonising doesn't help people to overcome their disadvantage and in fact entrenches dependency and hopelessness. These bills will do that. These bills will increase inequality, particularly for young people who will be set back potentially for life. Living on nothing for over 6 months at a time, which is what these bills enable, creates dependency. It will create hopelessness And it will create a revolving door of people having to go on and off income support because their barriers to employment, their barriers to inclusiveness are not being overcome with these measures. These bills contain the government's cruelest welfare measures, their cruelest budget measures. They will take out billions of dollars out of our social security system, money that should be invested in helping people. These measures do none of what I'm talking about in terms of the way we should be supporting people to overcome disadvantage, how we should be supporting the most vulnerable. These changes are purposely, I believe purposely designed to hurt the most disadvantaged. The inquiry into these bills heard repeatedly of the negative and potentially dangerous effects that these budget measures will have. The government is making a determined attempt to radically change our social security system in this country and our safety net. Of course, this isn't the first time that attempts have been made, and the previous Prime Ministers, Howard, Rudd and Gillard, all made changes that were negative, but these take the cake. These will fundamentally change how we care and support for the most disadvantaged. These bills, as I said, will add to the growing inequality in Australia, will have long-ranging effects as the wealth, interest and power are concentrated more and more with a few. These measures will affect generations ahead if they are limited. And they will see, when they're combined with other budget measures, they will see people priced out of the housing market. They will see them being unable to find accommodation. Education will become more and more inaccessible to people. There will be more insecure access to income support. And when you're sick, people will not be able to get adequate medical assistance. The submissions and evidence to these bills show that if these bills are enacted, they will compound poverty and hardship in our community and will not help improve employment participation. As St Vincent de Paul said to the inquiry, we cannot agree with these measures that will drive people even deeper into poverty, above all in an environment where there simply aren't enough jobs for the numbers of people looking for work. A number of organisations raise concern about the cumulative impact of these measures. Again, with National Welfare Rights saying, these bills contain a wide range of measures which have complex interactions with each other and with other measures proposed in other bills. The harshest reductions to income are felt by the most vulnerable social security recipients and low-income working families. These bills are fundamentally a shift in the wrong direction on income support. Again, National Welfare Rights Networks described the proposals in the bills before the committee as containing some of the most significant changes to the Australian system of income support since it was first introduced in a Consolidated Social Security Act of 1947, and I agree with them. These measures include forcing young people to live for 6 months and potentially longer without any income support, changes to the indexations of pensions, which will have increasing impact on older Australians and single parents and their ability to meet their living expenses. Increasing the retirement age will have a significant impact on many older workers. Cutting and freezing payments for families and single parents will have a significant impact. Reassessing payment eligibility for people with disability also has a significant impact. As NAPSEM said, and I go back to the point I made just a bit earlier, and that is the government know what they're doing. They know they're going to be impacting the most disadvantaged. So that's why I think this has been designed that way, because they had advice from modelling from NAPSEM that has made it clear that this budget is raising revenue by taking income from the disadvantaged people in far greater proportions than from the affluent. As a result of these changes to pensions, family allowances, unemployment benefits and other social security payments, the poorest 1 in 5 Australian families will be hit by up to 10.8% of their income in 2017-18. By contrast, the richest Australian families can expect to forgo a maximum of 1.7% in the same period. In their submission to these bills, St Vincent's de Paul said, "We cannot agree with measures that will drive people even deeper into poverty, above all in an environment where there, as I said, they simply aren't enough. There simply isn't enough work." These measures will impact on a range of Australians. Let's look at the budget measures that affect younger Australians, and in particular, the harshest budget measure of all. The one that shows this government simply does not understand what they are doing to young people. They think they will motivate people to find work because they think there's jobs out there for the picking if people were motivated. Well, there aren't the jobs there. There simply are not enough jobs for all these young people. But we'll dump them onto no income support anyway and expect you to live with nothing. And while I'm on this point, please, I beg the crossbenchers, do not compromise on this measure. Even a month, which I've heard some people talk about, is too long without income support. You already sow the seeds for homelessness, for people's inability to meet their basic needs. We need to be generating and adopting a system that is supportive of young people, that helps them overcome their barriers, that helps them see a future beyond being able to sometimes access a part-time, casual or temporary job where they cycle in and out of employment. Because that is not how you can build a family, that is not how you can build a secure future. This budget measure dumps young people onto no income support for 6 months and potentially longer if you happen to breach one of your requirements, because it's this neat, cute little description of nil payment, but you still have to meet your requirements that you have to meet if you are in fact getting income support. This is an ideological approach to how this government thinks you support young people. They have got it so wrong, and the evidence clearly shows that. And it also now, the Human Rights Committee says it's incompatible. The Abbott government's attitude to employment for young people, as I said, assumes that these jobs are readily available and young people are making a lifestyle choice. Well, none of the young people I've spoken to are making that lifestyle choice, and they tell me of the dozens and dozens of jobs that they have applied for, and the circumstances where there's 1,000 people applying for one job. I heard, in fact, over the weekend from a young person who said that, I think it's Target, was opening a new store in Western Australia, and they had had over 900 applications for around 100 jobs. That's 800 people that will be disappointed. And those 800 people, you can bet, will have applied and applied and applied for jobs. The government thinks that by making life unbearable for young job seekers, that they'll see the light, that their barriers to employment will suddenly be overcome. That is so far from the truth. It will condemn young people to poverty, to probably forcing them to lose their accommodation and not be able to meet their basic needs. That is not a safety net. That is simply getting rid of any form of social security for those young people. Poverty, we know, becomes another barrier to employment. Workforce exclusion is complex and enduring, particularly for people who are disadvantaged. This simplistic ideological approach will not help people into work. It will not overcome those complex, enduring problems. Denying income support to job seekers under 30 for more than 6 months and then subjecting them to work for the dole regimes, which I don't have time to go into all the problems there, is a major problem. It is fundamentally unacceptable, it is wrong-headed and needs to be rejected. You look at indexation. The government says that these bills propose to change the indexation for age pensions, disability support pensions and for parenting payment payments. However, the parenting payment payments, the indexation for those changes come in straight away. The others don't come in until after the next election. Again, of course, who will that hit the most? Single parents. Single parents have already cut after cut. But if you then look at what it'll do to aged pensioners and to people on disability support pension, ACOS has calculated it'll be about $80 a week impact by the time those indexation changes come into effect. That is a cut to the pension. Whether the government likes to describe it like that or not, is a cut to the pension. We reject it. Likewise, we reject the increase in retirement age, because we have not addressed older people's exclusion from the workplace once they fall out of employment, and we know a third of the long-term people on New Start have barriers to employment, and we are not adequately addressing those payments. So combining the changes to retirement age, indexation, freezing of assets, a significant impact on older Australians. And as COTA pointed out, both in their submission but also to the Senate inquiry, is that they are not opposed to looking at how you address retirement income, because there's many perverse incentives included which the government isn't addressing in these measures that COTA and others think do need to be addressed. So we think their idea of a retirement income review is a very good idea. Wouldn't you think it would be sensible to do that first before you bring in these ad hoc changes? And of course it's very cute for the government to say they're not breaking their promise. They are breaking their promise. This is a cut to the pension that will adversely impact many Australians. And if you then look at the other changes to the changes in this budget that will impact on them, such as co-payments, changes to access to health, another impact that older Australians have to face. Of course, then the government is talking about changes which simply I just cannot understand, other than they are seeking to demonise disability support pensioners who are now having their portability changed from 6 weeks to 4 weeks. Why? Why? Because they're demonising. They're trying to demonise people. Are they trying to say, oh, it's because you're travelling overseas, therefore you shouldn't be doing it because you're in a disability support pension? I've had a number of people contact my office saying they have been saving up for years and years to be able to travel overseas, and it's harder when you're travelling overseas with a disability. They're travelling over to see relatives or a dream that they've always had, to see the world or to see a specific place. They save up for years, and what's the government saying? Oh, you can only go for 4 weeks. Mean, demonising to people with disabilities. People with disabilities are extremely concerned about also the reassessment for those under the age of 35. They don't think the process is well thought out. There's the impact on families in terms of particularly changes the family tax benefit, and particularly to single parents. Again, another impact on single parents. Ill thought through. How many times are we going to have a bash at single parents in this place? Government after government has. And yet this government talks about trying to support families. Obviously single parents don't count as families to this government. A compensation, the supplement of $750 will not adequately compensate single parents. And then of course we're taking away again the pensioner education supplement, and that is particularly important for single parents. The previous government, the Gillard government, took it away. It was restored. They saw sense and restored it. It was only restored, they only got back access to it this year, and now it's going again. People with disabilities are extremely concerned about the demise of the pensioner education supplement and the impact that will have on them when people are trying to get better qualifications so they can engage in work. The problem for people with disabilities, it's hard to engage with work. They have many barriers to overcome. Single parents are the same. We will be opposing these two bills. There are a couple of measures in these bills that in fact could be supported, but we think the bills are so bad that it's not worth amending them. The measures such, for example, the equal pay case for Western Australia, equal remuneration case for Western Australia is an example. Dealing with superannuation and the pension and the seniors health card are important measures. The government's trying to maybe sugarcoat the other measures by putting these ones in there. The government wants support for those measures, they can pull them out of the bill and they can put them separately. We will not be seeking to amend these bills because they are not savable. They fundamentally affect our social security safety net and they should be rejected, both of them.
Senator Smith.